Hello, greetings, and welcome, everybody. My name is Phil Rice. Welcome to the Phil Rice YouTube channel. Always a pleasure to have you here with us today. For those of you who are watching the replay, thank you so much. Remember, there's lots of details in the description below for how you can reference what we are talking about today. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the discussion. I have with me a wonderful guest today, and we will be definitely taking questions from the audience. So please enter them into the live chat. Put a big Q, if you could, at the beginning, or put them in caps so that they stand out as questions. Makes it easier for me to find them and throw them up on the screen, and then we'll get to them. You can go to the philrice.substack.com, sign up for the newsletter there. And that would be great. We'll do a little bit of an expose on things towards the end of the session. And of course, let's get into today's topic. I would like to welcome back an honored guest, and I'm sure that the majority of people watching will know this man. And always a pleasure to have Mr. Mark Stavish back on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm doing fine. My office is only slightly chilly at this mid-March. So.
Oh, that's great. We're getting the heat has just tapered off. We hit the peak of summer probably a couple of weeks back, and now we're getting the nice autumn cool breeze coming in. And I have to say, it's most welcome. We have very humid summers here in Auckland, so I'm looking forward to it just being a little chillier. It's nice to spend time inside in the library during this particular part of the year. So,
well, that's So we're probably. Well, we're getting near the equinox, so it's probably equal. We're probably about the same temperature outside.
yeah, true.
Just don't ask me to convert to Celsius. That's all.
It's about that. It's about
Yeah.
that. Brilliant. Well,
Yeah,
Mark,
plus minus 32 times something.
I don't know. I don't know. The numbers seem too big. I don't know. Like I used to deal with metrics and imperials working because I used to work with John Deere, which is an American company, and I used to work with Scania and Hitachi, which are Swedish, Japanese, which both use metrics, and we had to keep doubles ups of all the nuts and bolts and everything for all the thing. It was a very educational process because it makes you think in different ways, thinking about the incremental sort of comparisons between how you measure an eighth inch bolt and an appropriate thread with a metric one, which is a lot more standardized, but it certainly kept my mind quite nimble. And so yeah, and that's funny because that kind of feeds into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today, which is understanding, I guess, the what underlies a successful meditation group. And you've got tenure in this conversation, and calling it a meditation group might be a little bit of a sort of a general brush, but we're talking really just about group dynamics from the angle of meditation groups, from esoteric groups, from lodge groups, whatever it is, bringing people together in fellowship for something that we all deem to be at various levels special, even sacred, and how we can, what is the value in even entertaining the prospect of this? And so I've got a series of sort of just general topics here. I'm just going to throw up with a little bit of context just to prompt the conversation, which I'm sure you're going to share some wonderful fruits with, sir. And, the first thing I wanted to bring up was, why would someone even start a meditation group? What are the benefits of bringing people together? And, what makes a sort of a solidified meditation group, different from a casual meetup? So, I guess why would someone start a group in the first place?
Well, if we just take the word meditation out and just say study group, so that people
Mm.
understand that this is applicable to really anything they're working. If you want to start I was just talking to a fellow today, asking about how to start a coven, and I said, well, first of all, you've got two problems there. So one of them is, and we'll get back to this, is what's called "Guard ye well the Western Gate," and that's a phrase that we hear often in Freemasonry, and it means don't let anybody in that you can't get out. And by the way, once they're in, you can't get rid of them, even if they leave. And what that means is when someone comes in, you're investing a lot of time and energy and resources into that person. So you want to make sure that they're a good fit ahead of time. So be slow to let people in. Why? Particularly in this group, because it was a group that involved ritual magic at some point. So you want to make sure that you have an outer screen, kind of a study or social group or social mechanism to get to know people before you can invite them in or see if they're interested in the more ritualistic activity. Because ritual activity should not be just open to the public, generally speaking. It's just not something, it doesn't work well that way. So just saying that, depending on what we're working on, we can have different levels of involvement with people. But so what is the purpose of your group? That's the first thing. What is it you want? If you just want to talk about tarot, then you can have a tarot study group or discussion group and pick your book and go with that. But it has to be, what is the values that you are trying to get out of it? So meditation in particular is tricky because what style of meditation will you be teaching? What tradition will it be under? My wife, and I attend this with her, goes to a meditation group, usually twice a month, even though it's every week. And I will accompany her. And there's absolutely positively zero instruction at that group because it's been established for so long. It's a very tightly run, I find it very pleasant, by the way. It's a very tightly run and very pleasant group. They have their liturgical practice, they have the chanting they do, they have the silent period, the silent walking, and it's just really a well-done, pleasant group of people. Okay. And so a group like that is wonderful if you kind of have an idea as to what's going on and you know the people. So what is it you want? Where will you be teaching? Who will be doing the teaching? Because at the end, no matter what we're doing, whether it's general esotericism, Zen meditation, mindfulness meditation, Vajrayana, pick something, anything. It all comes down to, why are you here? Why are you here? And from that, who is the teacher? What are the teachings and where do they come from? What can we expect from them? So the method. And who is the household of the faithful? Who are your companions in this journey? And again, if we use the example of a kind of a tarot study group, we have a lot more leeway there than we do if we're saying, I want to run a magical ritual lodge. And of course, there's a big gray area in between as well.
That's right. So, having a clear sort of, premise to start with of like, okay, that's right. Well, why? What is the reason? There's a thing that you like doing, and you recognize that, when you're with the right people, I mean, this happens in other areas of life as well, is that, when you're in a good mix of people, that those situational circumstances help to contribute to a greater experience of the thing. It makes the thing you enjoy more enjoyable, when it's with the right people. And so, this is critical what you're talking about, about the right people. And I've got some more to talk about that as well. What I wanted to talk about next was sort of drilling down a little bit into, foundational structure. And so, like you said, defining the core purpose of the group, having that very, everything's very transparent. So everyone knows what the score is, why are we here? What are we doing? How are we going to do it? And, and obviously, you mentioned that in the group that you're in, it sounds like, it's a flexible scenario too, because there's a sort of interplay between structure and rigidity, and sort of like and freedom and exploration as well. But you also talked about people who maybe aren't suitable as well. So I mean, running a guitar group for myself, for example, I couldn't just have kids dropping in and out of the groups because it disrupted the learning process. So having an onboarding process of sorts, so that the new people that come in can get up to speed so they can join in. But clear expectations and these types of things. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you've got to say about a good format for encouraging people, but also making transparent and obvious to everyone, clearly laying out expectations and how that can be done.
People who often decide they're going to start some kind of spiritual study group, which is what we're talking about, tend to be idealists. They also tend to be younger. And as a result, the lack of experience in running organizations is a real problem. So they learn the hard way what really goes on. And that's very unfortunate when you're an idealist, because it can tend to make one bitter.
Mm.
So the reality is, read a book on group dynamics or group organizational structure, find a couple of YouTube videos and watch those. And remember that you, as the founder, are the lightning rod. People are coming to you for guidance. So you have to have a clear vision of what it is you're doing this for, and you have to have a clear vision of what you are willing to put into it. And that can be really tricky because groups grow in a very dynamic fashion, a very organic fashion. And if you're having a highly structured learning situation, bringing new people in is terribly difficult. When we established the Institute for Hermetic Studies, and back in '98, and we were running biweekly classes, and we had a dedicated temple at that point. One of the things that I just didn't really consider was that, and this is going to be very technical, by the way, if you've got a bunch of people you've been working with for 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, and say, just going to make something up here, you're doing meditations on the tree of life, or the paths on the tree of life, and someone new wants to join, how do you get them into that? How do you fit them in? Because the curriculum, where you're at in the curriculum, can be so very different.
Mm.
So how do you bring people in? And it's like, whoa, it's very difficult. So you have to think about that if you're going to be doing a curriculum, that you kind of lock yourself into whoever your starting group is,
Mm.
unless you have another way of getting them instruction. Now, most people won't be having that problem. That's not going to be that concrete, that problematic. But just to let you know that you have to really think things through in terms of, how do we bring people in? And if you're doing a standard meditation group, that simply may not be much of a problem. But then it comes to the question of, where do you meet? And where you meet can have a tremendous influence on how you bring people in. It's always good to run these things in a public space. So if you're going to do a group, run it in your public library. You got a non-denominational church there. If you have to rent space on the cheap, do that. But it's far preferable to running it out of your home. In fact, I strongly discourage people from running public events out of their home, because you don't know who's going to show up.
I was actually going to put that in there. It's like, and this was one of the questions, talking about location and format, where, what's the chances are, if you're in a very niche sort of thing and you're attracting an online audience, you can have online, which is great. There's still a sort of I guess you might call it sort of an astral presence there. But when you're in person, and there's something very powerful about that. I've run online classes and I've had run in-person classes too, and there's a level of sort of exponential ambience, or some kind of elevating or expansion that happens in a physical proximity group situation that I don't get on the online. I did hold it in the house. I had friends, they were close friends that I knew very well, that I trusted, I wouldn't open this kind of thing up or my house up to, people that I didn't know. I would have to be a thing, go through a process there. But essentially, what ended up happening was just like guitar teaching, is that I took it out of the house and I took it and I set up an established premises, or I went and found something that gave a layer of separation between my personal life and this activity that I was engaged in. And that was very helpful because it helped to create a kind of a switch between the sacred and the mundane, if you will, so I could clearly define the working space, however you want to phrase it. So, what I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this sort of online versus in person conversation for running,
Well,
various types of
you made
groups.
a great point there, and as I said, people who start these things tend to be idealists, and they're not really thinking about you know strangers coming to their house,
Yeah,
or thinking that someone on the path might necessarily be a problem. Um, but you have to have a separation. You've got to have a clear boundary, because if you don't have a clear boundary between where your private life is and that public activity or semi-public, we'll call it, activity you're doing, um, that seeps into other areas, and you want to be very careful about that. You want to have clear boundaries. um, I mean, I could tell you some almost humorous horror stories out of my experience, and there weren't many,
yeah,
honestly. There were very, very few, but man, when they went, they went. It was bad. So you need to have that boundary, so that if someone you know, or someone you think you know, or someone you're trying to introduce into the group, um, ends up, and I'll be polite here, being disruptive,
mm,
you have a mechanism where you can uninvite them or something of that nature. Again, you have a friend who has a yoga studio or a gym or a dance studio, an art studio, something like that. If you can borrow it, because those are semi-public places anyhow, people are used to going
yeah,
there. It's used to being open to the public. Uh, yeah, always do things outside of your home before you get to know people, if you do decide to have it in your home at some point. Online is great. We get to talk to each other like we are now. We get to see and discuss things. But the nature of the online tends to be very visual, and it has a tendency to be very mental. There is
yeah,
kind of a slight disconnect. And when we talk about the teachings of any group, we're talking about the teacher, the teachings, and the household of the faithful of practitioners. Those who make up the three legs of the any group, any tradition. But we're also talking about teachings will always have involved with them thought, word, and deed. Or as they
mm,
like to say in Indo-Tibetan, thought, body, speech, and mind, or sometimes body, energy, and mind. So the point here is that we engage with each other on a very personal level, on a very physical level, and we're able to engage those emotions more strongly when we're together. And it's that engagement of the emotions more strongly that allow us to really learn to handle strong emotions,
mm,
really to handle strong experiences, and deal with people in these rarefied, intensified experiences and environments. It's how we grow. And at the same time, it's from that we can then begin to move into moving those energies in and through our body. Because the purpose of this transformative action that we're talking about, and we're saying meditation or general esotericism or ritual activity of some kind, you know, enlightenment on the mind is easy. And it's easy to have a wonderful idea. Moving it into the emotional space is another story altogether. And we
mm,
see that how people have great ideas until they're put under stress,
mm,
duress, and then they all collapse. But even so, moving it into the body, moving it into the emotions is one thing, but now you have to move it into the physical world itself, into the domain of
mm,
action. How do you keep this presence while you act?
mm,
So it is really important that we meet with people at least once or twice a year. When we have our annual conference, people come from across the country. to attend. They fly thousands of miles, 3,000 miles to attend, because the activities that we do as a group, the friendship, the companionship, the discussion, the after hours, all of this helps to strengthen not just the relationships that we have, but our practices. It strengthens the practice, because ultimately that's what we want out of a group. Is we want something that's going to reinforce us in our practice.
Hmm. Well, like, we talked about this just prior as well, as the value of the group environment, how it essentially gives us, feedback. Others can see things that we can't see because we're in our own soup, if you will, and people on the outside looking in can highlight things to us that maybe we're not aware of. And so there's this value in, being, I guess, having these yourself reflected from another, or seeing, sharing that sort of feedback. But when it, like you said, the when we're exposing ourselves to new tensions, and we're building resiliences to these new, when we're in a group dynamic, it's going to amplify things as well. And depending on what operation we're engaged in, and so we're exposing ourselves to new volumes of tensions that we need to adjust and acclimatize to. And so this is where the group dynamic can, we can it's easier to dial up the intensity for the purposes of growth and developing resilience as well, so that we can, on our own, we've got more headroom essentially when we go off by ourselves. Have you got something to share on that, Mark?
Well, I'm just thinking two things that are moderately related. I know a lot, and I've done a lot. And that was only possible because of the groups I've been in and the people I met. And I met people involved in esotericism that they were very impressive, not only in their personal lives, but also in their, I say personal professional lives, but also in their esoteric practice. And that makes a big difference. And I think let me just say resilience is a word used several times. I noticed a few days ago, and I was going to be talking about this or writing something about it, and I'll just bring it up here. I noticed that a lot of podcasts that friends were sending me uh, were by practitioners or academic practitioners, or essays they were sending me. And the tendency of all of them, and what they all had in common, was that they were talking about how powerless they felt.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, you're feeling powerless because of the world situation, whatever that happens to be. Okay. You need to have someone grab you by the scruff of the neck and tell you time to grow up. And that's part of what a good group does.
Hmm.
But they do it politely, and they do it with genuine sincerity. I mean, I say this because I've sat in esoteric lodges, I've mentioned this before, with men who were Bronze Star recipients, uh, men and women who, one woman I spoke to at length in one lodge I was at, she was surprised because I knew something about it when we were at talking, who was at the University of Munich uh, during the anti-Nazi movement of the White Rose. And I asked her about it. She was very psychically powerful, very powerful. And I've sat in lodges with some guys that were brought over on Operation Paperclip,
Hmm.
Right? And I've sat in the same lodges again with other people who ran multi-million-dollar companies at the time. And just what we would call normal middle class people too in the same group, but of a time period where resilience was really not an option. You didn't have a
Yeah.
choice to not be resilient.
Yeah.
So if I had turned to them and said, I'm right now in 2025, I feel so disenfranchised and out of power about what's going on in the world today, you know, that just wouldn't fly. There would be some serious questions about, well, why do you feel that way? And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about this feeling? And how are you going to take control of your life to the best that you can?
Mm.
Because clearly bombs aren't dropping on your head, okay? And you've got the time to have this little pity party for yourself. So how are you going to mature through that? I know that sounds kind of rough, but I think that's the point. I want you to understand that's part of that sandpaper is part of what a group will offer you if you're open to it. And I don't
Mm.
just mean people who are going to be rude or mean to you. I don't mean that. I mean, some you if you're in the right group with the right people, you have a good chance of meeting one or two who have really been somewhere down that path and can offer you in the path of life and can offer you some insight and valuable insight about what this is all about so that it doesn't become escapism or role playing or something. So
Mm.
that's where, for me, I need to stress that my experiences with groups were somewhat exceptional in many of the people that I was able to meet and be with. So, some of them was profoundly. Uh, I just simply would not have known many of the wonderful people that I met had I not gotten out of my house. It's just that simple. They weren't going to even if they did have Zoom back then. These aren't the kind of people who probably would have been on it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's this there's stuff going on all the time, and we only know what we're capable of handling sometimes when it's put there and we get tested on it. And so, I've found it great. I've got people who give me critical feedback, but it's in a constructive sort of format, like it's designed to help me grow. I've got a great AI chat thing running at the moment where I've got like a no holes barred sort of like what you might call it, like a creative sparring partner that starts every conversation off with a hard truth. And it's so eloquently put. It's jarring, but it kind of jostles any kind of wallowing in anything. Like it's just fantastic because, these kinds of things can creep in, especially sometimes hanging out with groups of people a lot as well. You can sort of take a bit of that sort of disempowerment on as well. But hanging out with the right people will help to embed yourself and those more useful, I would say, ways of being in. They say, what is it? You're the sum of the 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 average sum of the five closest people you hang out with is a very sort of arbitrary example.
Well, I've used that number often, and because most people don't have more than 5 or 6 close friends.
Mm.
And I remember uh, getting told once in a training class when I was doing drug and alcohol counseling, that you really need 10, you need to know 10 people to be well rounded. And I thought to myself, you need to know 10 people. Like, no, actually have a relationship with. I'm thinking, well, how many people do I really have a relationship with?
Mm.
And you think about it, it may not be 10. So these groups can help you as long as you make sure that they're not, and that's why you need to shop around. If you're going to join a group, shop around. You want to make sure that they're problem solving, they're uplifting, uh,
Mm.
they're moving in the direction that you want to go in. And if they're not, you want to start your own, that's perfectly all right. Just take your time with it. Get a friend or two who you are comfortable with. Have some regular discussions, prayer, meditation, visualization, all that, and slowly find a way to meet other people. Begin in a public forum, public place, and then let it grow naturally and slowly and organically from there. We were recently told a story of, I think the number is just three now, but there were several women. Uh, they're quite old. I think they're in their late 80s, maybe early 90s. Uh, live in a very uh, respectable neighborhood, we'll say. So they dress quite appropriately. And they had been quietly running a coven for something like 40 years now, 50 years now,
Who would have known?
you know, especially if you know the neighborhood. That's where, and I find that I'm not surprised. I'm not. Uh, Actually, it would be 50, 55, 60, yeah, about 55 years.
Wow.
And I'm not surprised because, again, because I've been to so many groups and I've met so many different people. Uh,
Mm.
Whereas one of the jokes I have with folks is people tell me, "Oh, geez, I wish there was a group out there. I feel, so isolated." And I go, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. Barnes and Noble has an aisle of five shelves, or what is it? Of four bookshelves of 5 rows each, just for you. All those books are there just for you because you're the only one interested in this." And then it takes a while and they kind of sink in and they go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." There's a tendency now because of the ease of isolation, particularly through internet communication and,
Mm.
and, uh, you know, whatever, everything else that, to really isolate, to self isolate when we don't
Mm.
need to. And to think that, and what that does is it creates a kind of pridefulness that I'm the only one interested in this. I'm the weirdo. I'm the outsider. You have to get rid of those ideas. Those ideas aren't helpful. You're someone searching, you're a human being on the path, just like everyone else is a human being somehow on some path. And um, that way it opens it up more to finding that you may find that people who have some very different views than you may be very helpful to you. And in
Mm.
that setting of a meditation group or an esoteric lodge, where you have to put a lot of those differences aside for the purpose of the ritual or the purpose of the meditation, you begin to realize, maybe I need to loosen up here, or maybe I need to be a little more open, or listen a little more, or take that idea in. Maybe I need to research that. And you know what I'm saying? Because that's the growth part. The growth part isn't just the great visionary experiences or astral projection or something. That all those things are nice, but that's not the growth. The growth is your functionality and
Mm.
capacity as a person.
Yeah, yeah, that well put. Thank you. Having others who want to help you grow. Everyone's there to help each other grow, to lift each other up.
Hmm.
And so you're hanging out with like-minded people, and you're getting. I think too, in my life experience, noticing that when rapport is built, when you're talking to someone that you're building a relationship with, you've got a mutual respect for each other. You know, there's it's going to be easier for maybe a person who has a tendency to put guards up with incoming, critical data. They're going to be more receptive to that information. It just basically the group's functionality expands. It's good for so many things, and like you said, that group of ladies, it's a great example. I mean, they know what they're like, and they'll keep it going, and they'll figure it out, and they have. It's a testament to, it's like seeing people who are still in marriages after 30 or 40 years. I mean, that's quite a rarity. I'd like to see that increase personally, because it's sort of a testament to the value of sticking at something. And and I don't see the group as being anything different. It's a type of a relationship or a marriage or a type of, a commitment as well. And this kind of leads into the next topic, which is, setting up some parameters for operation to go, okay, here it is. This is the thing. We're formalizing it, and we're doing it in a way that is, when you're built in the building process, like you're going, okay, well, what is important to us? What are our non-negotiables? What are we, how, do we have a tight group? And when I was in the band, first thing you do is you go find a drummer, because as soon as you got the drummer, that's the core of the band. Then you
Mm-hmm.
can bring in other people as you need. But whatever happens, you and the drummer are best friends, because they're quite rare. Good drummers can be hard to find. So you have a core. Now that does denote a kind of an inner circle, but there is I guess, an administration aspect to it. I don't know, like this. Like I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. About setting up transparency and also, the back end of operations, if you will.
Band is funny because a good friend of mine is in a very well-known and successful band, and I get to hear the stories, and it's hilarious because we'll often compare the problems of the music industry with publishing, and the same
Yeah.
rascals are in charge. Um, the thing about that, you have to be very clear. I think any group should be almost as easy to get out of as it is to get into, which means easy come, easy go. So if you want to have accountability from people, you have to be slow to form the relationship. And this was something I learned about midlife. The tendency of the American way of things is to be a little bit excessively familiar.
Mm.
It's to engage in relationships too quickly. There needs to be, especially in this domain where you're dealing with really your psyche, your soul, and the soul of others, the mind, awareness, consciousness. Uh, there should be a slowness in forming of the relationship because trust is very important. I mean, even if you're not dancing naked around the cauldron, you still need to have trust. You need to have trust, and that trust is that these people are they're either not going to steal your silverware, or that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. So depending on what you want out of this, you should have some general guidelines. I
Mm.
think too many of the guidelines that are getting sent around today are just some kind of bad echo of whatever is currently politically correct,
Mm.
um, creating safe spaces and all that nonsense.
Mm.
Spiritual locations are not safe spaces. They really shouldn't be for the most part. Now, some of them, okay, yes, but for the most part, what we are talking about, this is to get you into unsafe spaces so that you can
Mm.
better understand yourself and
Yeah.
others. Uh, Now, do we have a safe place to get unsafe? Well, that depends on the skills of the people you're working with.
Mm.
So that's an important thing too. We saw some terrible things over the last few years, mostly during the COVID. Was it during COVID or pre-COVID? Uh, in which uh, young woman, one person was injured, others were injured, and one person died at a very poorly run sweat lodge
Oh.
in the United States. Now we don't hear of those too often because in this case someone died, but that type of thing is happening too, particularly when uh, we'll say psychedelics are often being employed or
Mm.
deployed is often. There should be no pressure to take this, and if it's willful taking, what is the context of it?
Mm.
Is this just a party, or is this a gateway mechanism? Um, because now we have more access to those, and I think that they're used a little too easily and loosely as
Mm.
well. I think that people's financial obligations need to be made clear because if you're holding this somewhere, you're renting space. And if you're not renting space, what are the costs and who's going to pay for it? So you need to make this very clear. Idealists are going to believe that a donation basis is going to work, but it won't. It
Yeah.
simply won't. You're never, ever going to. I mean, I hear stories, but it's a one-off. It's not like on a long-term basis. You're never going to make the money off donations that you need to do to run anything. So if your cost of renting a room, and let's just face it, if it were a nominal $50 a month for 2 meetings a month, which is really unheard of these days, uh, well, where are you going to get 600 a year from? So what this does is it kind of has a way of forcing people to recognize the real value. What is the value that's at work here for the organization, for the group? And again, if you're just having a reading club, you can have that in your local library or non-denominational church, like Unitarian Universalist Church or something, maybe your public civic space. That's not an issue. If you want to run a magical lodge, then you've got to get people to really, they've got to buy in and commit.
Yeah, I've tried various formats for hosting things with the best of intentions. I'm aware that there is a psychology to sales and marketing there's a sensible way of operating. People are hardwired to perceive value. Sometimes if something doesn't have a price tag, people will just turn their nose up at it and not look at it. Even if it's potentially highly valuable. Sometimes it's about how it's expressed in that. But to make something sustainable, leads in beautifully to the next conversation topic here, which is talking about sustaining the momentum and I guess the continuity. Because the person who's running it all, and I've done this, hosting and doing various events and things, you know, man, there's not much left in the tank after some of the gigs that I've played. And then afterwards, I don't have the capacity. I don't have something to sort of help me through the rejuvenation process of what it cost me as well. So it's just like a double loss. It was like a double slap in the face, but it was like I just carried on because I wanted to iterate until I'd found something that was supporting itself. I'm doing this with my channel as well. I'm trying to create value that people can recognize and give them an opportunity to do that. I'm wanting to make sure, on one hand, I'd love for everything just to be, um, you know, uh, to be self-sufficient. And so I'm working towards that, so it doesn't take from me. If anything, everyone's feeding in like I'm happy to make the bread. I just need some people to drop me in some ingredients. I'll do the baking. You guys bring me the goods, right? I like that sort of analogy. And so, when it comes to, if you're the one sort of steering the ship or captaining the ship, so to speak, and having membership is important. To create an environment that people want to come along to. I want to think that as I increase the aesthetics of my channel. That's going to add a natural magnetism to it. And then, of course, I'm aware of things like burnout as well, as I've put there. And so I'd love to hear you talk about, some of these topics, Mark.
I think that the problem is a complex one because depending on the group that we're talking about, if we have a book of the month club and we're reading a book on tarot, or maybe a book on astrology for 2 or 3 months, that's going to have a different level of engagement and different problems. Because there you have to make sure that you get the people to read the material, get them to come to the session, and get them to participate. And then you have to have a good social afterwards. So you've got to have refreshments that get and keep people there and talking. The social is an incredibly important part of any of these gatherings. And it should not be seen as an afterthought, but really is kind of like the sacred feast.
Oh, I
So
love that. Sacred feast. Nice.
even if it's not phrased as such, that's really what's going on. So you need to make sure that you have a good social arrangement. I have a fellow here who, oh, it takes about 30 minutes to get to him, so it's not too terrible of a drive. And I would love to go to his shop when he'd ask me to talk because I'd go down, I'd talk for an hour, maybe a little more, usually about an hour. We have some of the recordings on our YouTube channel. And it's just a very nice location. But he would put out this tremendous spread. I mean, it was just spectacular. So We'd always go. So of course, because it's going to just be a fun time. We're going to have a good time.
Mm.
Now, if you're setting something up like that, that's going to cost money. Uh, if you're, say, in a traditional observance lodge of Freemasonry, your dues are higher because every meeting is going to be a catered meal.
Mm.
Now, catered may not be hugely off the charts expensive, but you have to figure $15 or $20 because if it's not catered, someone's got to cook it. Which is kind of one of the issues, is that we look at spiritual groups from a very immature narrative. It's like we look at spiritual teachers. Most people don't have a good encounter. They don't have an experience with a spiritual teacher. What they have is a notion of what one should be like based on fiction. So whether it's Obi-Wan or Gandalf or, I don't know, pick your archetype. Um, that's where it tends to come from. They have these very naive notions, or it's going to be like, Jesus or something. Well, Jesus didn't eat, right? Or did he, or didn't he? Or how did he eat? Where did he sleep? I mean, those details seem to be lacking in the gospel narratives.
Mm.
So we tend to ignore then what are the needs of the teacher. When you want, and it can be demanding because depending on what you're doing, you may find that suddenly people are coming to you for solutions to serious life problems. I get
Mm.
that.
Mm.
I get at least one of those emails, at least one a month, usually two. And if you have then students, and we'll call them students in this case, you have to be careful because is it a student relationship that you have with them, or is it a friendship that you have with them? It could
Yeah.
be a little bit of both, but it can't always. It gets really tricky and messy. And then there's my favorite one, and I've had to say this in groups in the past. This is not a dating service. Because when people, the famous story of the Dharma divorces, you know, the wife goes off, it's always the wife, goes off to the yoga studio or the yoga retreat or the meditation retreat, finds out she's terribly dissatisfied and finds her soulmate, and divorces ensue. And it happens that way because, of course, 80 to 90% of the attendees are female. So the number is going to be geared that way. I've seen that with some guys too, not as much. That's probably just because of the statistics. But you see that then where people are looking for someone who understands them or is into the same stuff they're into or what have you. And you have to find a very polite way to squash that. Not that it's forbidden, not that relationships are forbidden. You can't probably do that. But you really got to just say, guys, listen, I don't care what you do. I've had to, and again, this is in a magical group, it's different. I don't really care what you do, but this is not going to affect anyone else.
Mm.
You understand that?
Yeah.
And that's where the adult is in the room. Who's the adult in the room? And the leader is always the adult in the room. Now, rarely will that necessity to step up be there, but as the leader of a group, you're probably going to have to do it at least once or twice a year. And I truly mean it as the adult decision. You're going to have to be the adult in the room. Because again, when we look at organizations, how they're often structured, it's like, I say to my sons, hey, put it in the sink and wash it. Yeah, I bought it. I brought it home. I cooked it. I served it, and I'm going to clean up most of it. At least clean your own plate.
Yeah.
And not that they're not being disrespectful. They're being absent-minded. They have to be told over and over again, put it in the sink and clean your plate. This is what's expected of you as a young man.
Mm.
And that's part of the adulting process. That's part of the duties. When we look at spirituality, people look at these because it's often it's being sold. Remember, these groups are being promoted. So it's just to them, it's just merchandise or service, just as there's any other merchandise or service. I come, I pay my money if money's expected, or I don't pay my money if no money's expected or asked for, and I go away. So how do you then take this group activity and have it reflect something truly special?
Mm.
That's part of that process of the boundaries, and also how you manage to avoid burnout is by setting those boundaries. What can you really do? If someone is coming to you with personal problems and you don't want to deal with them, you say, I'm not I'm not a professional psychotherapist. I'm
Mm.
not going to uh, give you any suggestions or advice on this. This is beyond my scope of capacity. See, that's politer than saying, really, I just don't want to deal with it. Because some people even feel guilty about that if they don't want to deal with it. Like they should. Like there's a moral obligation. No, you just recommend them to a therapist or an online crisis center or what have you. I mean, I've had people call me at 2 in the morning, suicidal ideation. Okay, I deal with it and then I go to bed. But I got a professional experience with some of that, so it's
Yeah.
easier for me to just talk to them and then go to sleep.
Yeah.
It may not be for you, and I'm not going to say that that's going to happen. But if you run a group long enough with enough people, at some point someone is going to pop a cork.
It's like a proportional probability. When I got up to 120 odd students as a music teacher, they were coming in. When if it was just one kid by himself, he'd be bringing his problems in. He'd be stressed out and he wanted to talk, and he didn't feel like he could talk to anyone else. And so I had to sort of review the situation. Like it was just like a surprising thing, and this person's wearing their heart on their hands, and it's like, well, what do I do? They're opening up to me, and I sort of just I learnt, you know, on the job, and how to be monitor sort of my input and participation in things that were outside, like you say, the scope of my capacities. And it made me think about, what is my role? Well, I'm dealing with impressionable teenagers a lot, and well, just children in general. I was teaching from 7 up to wherever we want to go, because I was teaching all ages. But when you're dealing with them en masse and you're seeing these things, there's sometimes, the best thing to do is just to, because they want to place their confidence in you too. And they don't want to, they won't talk to their parents, but they will talk to you. And you've got to go, what's the right thing to do here? And when there's children involved, you get the parents involved. Okay. That's pretty standard, because it's, um,
Well, that's it.
it's a difficult one, actually, because I had to pivot a little bit in that process and learn how to do it. But yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point too, because sometimes if you do stuff in public, and this is why you want to do it in public areas, is what if you get someone who's 15, 16, 17 showing up to your meditation class? How do you deal with minors? Um, I once knew of near me, I mean, literally around the block from where I was living, a group that was running a coven, 2 adults, and they had 3 girls in the coven, probably no older than 15,
Hmm.
most at most.
That's
I,
quite young. Yeah.
now they had a shop, so they're selling stuff, and the girls are probably coming in there to buy stuff. But
Hmm.
personally, that's not an after hours activity that I would recommend.
No.
And I said that, this is a long time ago. I said something to them politely, uh, because they knew that I was aware of it. And then I kind of just made a joke about my work reporting obligations. So fortunately, they ended up folding up shop and moving, you know, leaving town. But that's the kind of thing that you have to be prepared for. What if someone comes to your group that is an adult but is clearly suffering from some kind of mental illness?
Mm.
I've had that, and fortunately, I knew how to talk to them at the time, and was able to politely get them out of the room and out of the building and on their way. Then you have those things which happen in the group with individuals who really do have a traumatic breakthrough and breakdown. And how do you manage that?
Mm.
So, will it happen? Yes. Is it going to happen a lot or all the time? No. I think most people will have, if you're doing this long enough, you'll see maybe one of it every 5 years, you know. But you have to understand that what we're doing is about getting in touch and understanding the deepest parts of ourselves.
Mm.
And that's why, I did write that monograph, Pathology of the Sublime. And I think it's really important that if you're going to work with groups, you need to have an understanding of group dynamics, but
Mm.
also the kind of pathology, the psychic pathology that can take place when undertaking psychospiritual activities. That's a topic that is so painfully underaddressed within the various disciplines. It's really kind of shocking, but it's important to recognize it and to study it.
Yeah, it's going to happen, and I think having knowing this in advance is certainly advantageous to know and go, okay, well, when this happens, we've got a protocol, we've got a strategy, we've got a first aid kit ready to go for the things that we know that we can handle. But like you said, depending on the seriousness of the group and what the road is, you know, this work's going to tear strips off you, and in some cases, and you got to know that for one thing, you're going to have supportive people around you, but you're also got to go, well, there's going to be things that emerge that you may not be aware of as well, and so those surprises you're going to have to sort of manage in situ. And but yeah, I think where I'm going with this is that, and it was great that we brought this up too, and bringing real world examples, because it
Mhm.
happens in all spheres. It happens in the workplace. I used to have a mentor at my work who was very good at managing personal. He was the boss, but he was great at managing personal situations. To a fault where it actually got in the way of his work. There were a lot of sort of people who it was a high pressure situation, and so he was putting fires out a bit there. But that's to his credit. He was an excellent figure because he was able to speak very calmly, coolly, objectively, and very compassionately and resolve situations. He got quite adept at it. And so some people might find that this is something that is meaningful to them as well. But yeah, when it happens and you've got damage control, there's a way to do it. I mean, the kid that comes into class and poops his pants and it's just disrupting the whole class, all right, you go and find some help. You go and find someone that can sort of deal with the situation in the most appropriate way possible. And if there's a crisis, you're an adult. How do you do this? This is why this kind of running in groups and events and things. There's such great personal growth in it because you learn to become adaptable and agile amongst surprising things that you maybe weren't expecting. But hopefully over time, there won't be too many surprises, and it'll be like, oh yeah, that's this thing. This is how we deal with that. And yeah. So sorry, Mark, did you have something you wanted to add
No,
there?
that's right, and part of that is the adaptability is in part of learning how to delegate.
Oh, that's
You know,
great. Yeah.
really, you delegate. You don't clean up. You ask someone else to clean up. And what happens there is people get involved. The more people are involved, even if you're doing small things, they have a small task, then you can learn if they can be trusted with bigger tasks. And I'm quite serious when I put it to you this way. You give someone the task of bringing, the cookies. You give someone the task of, making the herbal tea. You give someone the task of taking care of the email list. Well, do you jump them into the email list first? No, you see if they can take care of bringing cookies.
Yeah.
You can see if they can handle tea and cleaning up.
Yeah.
You see if they can handle taking care of the room rental or the relationship with whoever is allowing you to use their space. You slowly move in, and it's okay. And you just find that if you got 4, 5, 6 people and everybody's doing a little bit, and you have a nice group that meets twice a month, you can go for decades doing that. Because everybody is just doing a little bit, and that's it. If you want to do more, if we're talking again about esoteric lodges or temples, that's another story. That's a much higher level of intensity, of commitment and involvement for different reasons. But still, those things need to be delegated even more so then, because I found that when I attempted at one point to delegate teaching, this is years ago, some ritual work to someone who was very good at it, instead of teaching what I had asked in the manner I had asked, they were teaching something else. And I said, well, that's fine, but that's not what I'm doing, and that's not what we're doing as a group. So where are we going here?
Yeah.
You have to have some consistency. And that's the other part with groups. Why people leave groups often is there's no direction. There's no sense of coherency. This week I'm going to read a book on Zen Buddhism. Next month we're going to read a book on I don't know, psychosynthesis. Then we're going to, you know what I'm saying? It's all over the place. So you have to know your audience. You have to know what and your own capacity there. In a magical lodge, there has to be a curriculum, and that curriculum has to be workable. That's why we wrote Light on the Path. That published Light on the Path is a working 4-year guide, and there are choices. As you as the group leader, the instructor, director of instruction, you could begin to work with this and figure out, well, what is the group able to do? What are they not able to do? What are we as a group able to do? You can't teach alchemy if you don't have a lab space. It's just that simple. So you have to know what your physical limits are. Remember, there's the pentagram, the teacher, the teachings, the practitioners of the household of the faithful, the time in which those teachings are given and take place, and the space it takes place in. You need all 5 of those for anything to happen. You don't have them, you're in trouble.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing I've enjoyed about, I'm involved in the development of some what you might loosely refer to as educational entertainment products. Yeah. And I'm sort of offering some, I guess, esoteric insights from my own sorts of studies and practices and things. And, when you have one thing I enjoy using is sort of like a breaking down the process of what I'm doing into an elemental framework. And so what it does is it allows me to understand the outline or the layout or the template of what's involved, and then apportion it. And then there's a level of engagement which makes it quite fulfilling. And so I try to bake in as much of that into what I do throughout the day. It sort of helps to fuel it. But having a process, like you said, sorry, I'm just going to skip back and say, the delegation is so critical because, like my father says, many hands make light work, and many hands make light work. I just wanted to throw that one in too. Sorry, I have to put one of those in every show, something like that. That's like an esoteric dad joke, I guess, is it?
I'm going to go vomit later. I'll hold it. I'll choke it down.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, I've got one more quick topic, and we'll sort of conclude with this, and then we'll jump into some audience questions because I see there's a couple of things in there, and then we want to definitely give a plug because you've got a bunch of stuff going on, and we want to definitely give people some awareness of that. But you know, you've set up your group. You've found some wonderful people. You've got a bit of an understanding of a vetting process about who makes good quality candidates for what the undertakings are. You've got a suitable premises that's themed, or it's just right. It's conducive to good quality, to good outcomes. You've got transparency with expectations, clear expectations. Everyone understands what is. When things go a certain way, you have ways of dealing with them. And you've got some structures, boundaries, and parameters in place to sort of help maintain that form. So, people know what's up, and you're aware of some things. You've built up some muscles from some of the surprises that have come and caught you off guard, and so you've learned how to build those muscles up on the spot, or just through sitting and working through things. And then, of course, there's this like, okay, we've got something here that I think's worth maintaining.
Mm-hmm.
And, all right, so let's talk long-term growth and evolution. Like what is because there's short-term things that need to be taken care of. And then there's planning for the long game of like, okay, you know, there's things here that because you're going to notice that over a long period of time, there's going to be cycles or patterns, if you will, and you're going to be recognizing everything from, people get sick at a certain time of the year, or, this road's closed off because of seasonal thing. I mean,
Yep.
I'm being silly here, but
Yeah.
I'm also going, like, how do you go, okay, what is it going to take to ensure the continuity of this great thing that we're building together?
Well, and you have to decide that. What is your purpose for being? Why are you here? When Jean Dubuis established the Philosophers of Nature, he set it up, the official date was 1978. It was going to have a 22-year lifespan, and it officially closed in 2000. Now, there was some activity prior to that, and there was activity after that, but it had an expiration date on it. When AMWORK was set up, it said that it had a 108-year public life cycle. Now, that's interesting because 108 years public, which would mean that different jurisdictions would have different start dates, so that cycle would be different for them. And many people ask, okay, now we've hit the 108 years. Is Grand Lodge going to close down? And of course, it's not going to close down. And they addressed that several decades ago, I think. But along with that, the organization did fall into a state of considerable reduction from what it once was, at least in some jurisdictions. So you look at what is that purpose? What is your sense of longevity that you want for this? These women who have their coven in a nice hoity-toity section of town north of me, they're probably not thinking about continuity, about bringing people in to keep anything going. Some people don't think about continuity until it hits them in the face when, the first generation of founders is gone. So you really have to decide as you're doing this, what is the lifespan you want it to have? So you can put it as a terminal thing, so many years, or let it run and see how it goes. But if you're running something that you want to survive, you need the energy of life. And the energy of life in this world is money.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have the time, the talent, and the treasure of your participants. Again, we talked about the 5 points of the pentagram, and the thing that makes that run is the holy trinity of time, talent, treasure. Without that, you're done. It just doesn't happen. So you need to be an official organization at that point. In the United States, that's simple. You go to the IRS, you get an EIN number. It takes about 10 minutes on the internet. Then with that EIN number, you go to your bank and you open up an account. Now, you can become at some point a registered association. That takes a little bit of cash to do. It's worth doing at some point. Not much. The paperwork is fairly easy. Or you can become a nonprofit entity, meaning a nonprofit organization of some kind if you choose to. Or you can become a church. A church is a nonprofit, but different than a 501c3. So all of these things then decide or impact your notion of longevity. Or you could simply be a for-profit educational entity. They exist. You want to do that? That's fine too. I'm not ruling those out. But somehow in this domain, for whatever reason, in the esoteric domain, people like the idea of nonprofit, but they don't really understand all that is a tax designation. The bills still need to be paid. It doesn't mean you get stuff for free. So you're going to have to spend some time educating your membership about what their financial duties and obligations are. And you need to do that early on. And then you need to show them, more or less, you got to keep decent books on where that money goes, what it's for, what are the projects. And then you need money for the future, too. A lot of folks get edgy about this. But if you're going to do long-term stuff, you need some long-term cash. And each group has to decide how much that is. I know one group, their long-term cash is probably around $1,500. It's not much. That'll get them through, something like 6 months of activity if they come to a crunch. And if they don't get anything after that, then they'll probably just close down. But they're okay with that. I have other groups that I know of that have tens of thousands of dollars of long-term cash set up. And that means then it's invested. So now you understand, this is how you need to understand that this is a business. I know that's a dirty word for people, but it is a busyness, if you like that better. This is something that keeps you busy doing things that keep it alive. And if you don't treat it as such, like if you don't treat it as your own home, then you're going to find yourself homeless. In this case, the group is homeless. So the more you talk about responsibilities and obligations and are very clear on them early with new members, the better off you'll be. And that has to be something in writing. Yeah.
And that's like obviously sometimes there's a central or a core document like a constitution or a code of conduct or something like this.
Your
They can
bylaws.
sort of yeah. So that's it. Could you give us an overview of like what would typical sorts of like documents or transparency in the form of a document, like what would people come across, or some search terms so they can go and sort of get to understand? Because you're right, the business structure idea, I mean, it's a sustainable entity. That's what you're trying to build here, right? And so by looking at other structures within society that are intelligently executed and operated for the purpose of longevity, it's like, well, I mean, we can draw from that and be inspired from that. And one of those things that they will often have is they will have their parameters of operation clearly laid out. And so their mission statement, their vision, their long-term, these types of things. What are some of the sort of like a key selection of like a bullet points of documents that you think you'd find in a successful institution in a meditation group, something?
Well, you said a good one right there, your mission statement. And it's really good to have a clear mission statement that can be said in 12 seconds. I've seen people do mission statements that are worthless. They're so vague, they're worthless. You have to go over your mission statement with someone who's willing to help you really iron this out so that it's meaningful. And we help people become better. Okay. Worthless. How do you do that? Give me an idea as to how. You have to have enough precision in there where it stands out so you get a sense, because what happens is mission creep. And mission creep is fundamentally, in the last 20 years, that has meant the politicizing of spiritual movements. Spiritual movements in the West have become heavily political and engaged in various forms of social activism. Now, my point is, I don't need to join your group to do that. You're not special. You're just like all the other political action committees out there. You're just dressing it up in neo-pagan garb or uh, Buddhist garb or some other garb. No different than the evangelicals or the Methodists. So you want to avoid mission creep. You're going to say, oh, we should really help the community. Well, how? Well, we're going to raise money for the homeless shelter, which what I found is people typically do things that everyone else is doing. If you're going to help the community, partner with another aspect of the community that and do something that other people aren't doing. So partner with the community and help rebuild the playground, because the little bit of money that you have is going to go a lot further there than at the homeless shelter. The homeless shelter is going to get money. They can get grants. Okay. But that small playground in the borough or the municipality, they probably can't, or they won't, and the $1,000 you can help give them for that is going to go a lot further. So you have to use some intelligence if you decide to move into this idea of how are we as a group going to get involved. At the same time, you may find that has tremendous damage to the organization. Um, the Unitarian Universalist Church, locally, but locally in particular, is really nothing more than a liberal political action group. They really shouldn't even be a church designate. That didn't happen all at once. That happened over time. But it became such an overwhelming force that everything in the church is now focused on the external world. Well, meditation and spiritual practice is about getting me to focus on and connect to my inner world. So if every time I go there, you're just constantly pointing me back out the door, I don't really need to be there. And it's had tremendous damage to them. Over the years, in terms of their capacity to grow and develop partnerships outside of that narrow range. So mission creep is something you have to really, really avoid. Okay? And because it happens easily. Let's go teach meditation here. Okay. Well, let's go teach it here. And suddenly you find yourself, let's go teach meditation in the prisons. Well, good luck with that. You keep thinking that you have more capacity to do things than you do, and that's how you often lose volunteers and you lose members, because either they don't want to do it or you burn them out in doing it. So I can't emphasize that part enough about staying true to the mission and knowing what that is and what the boundaries of it are. With that comes your bylaws. As an organization, you need bylaws. So you just look it up. Church bylaws, Zen group bylaws, meditation group bylaws. Look them up. There's stuff out there, and then you look at them and you compare. And then you look up guidelines for running. Now we have guidelines on Light on the Path. We have some guidelines for running groups. And one of the guidelines is for people that they should only be allowed 7 years of active involvement. After they reach 8 years, they have to take a year off. They can come, but they can't do anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the idea is you force people to sit down.
Yeah.
And stop always being engaged, because what happens is they can get over engaged, and then new people can't come in. New people can't take on that job or that task. So that's part of longevity too. How are you training new people to take on these tasks? Now, at the Institute, we have a teacher training program because, this just knowing this stuff isn't make you a good teacher. Teaching is a skill that you have to learn. Public speaking is a skill you have to learn. The therapeutic modalities of dealing with people, problem solving, is a skill you have to learn. And they don't sound terribly esoteric, but trust me, they really are, and they're more useful to you in many ways than doing a whole laundry list of memorizing associations for Kabbalistic gematria or tarot cards.
Mm.
Because you're really engaging with the energy of the moment.
Mm.
You're engaging with the energy of the people, and that's really what we're moving towards in this direction. How to generate and experience and properly interpret and manage these energetic encounters
Mm.
in a very dynamic environment.
Well, it's a training ground, for development when you have, other people involved. You have training partners in a sense, and so uh, I think just quickly sort of encapsulate the conversation. There's great value in seeking out a type of fellowship or a dojo, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
but there's good practices for you know making it so you're going to get the most out of it, and one of those things is having a clear direction. You know which way the train tracks are going. It's like we're going this way. We're specific and we're succinct. When you're talking about the mission statement, boil it down, because if it's too vague and generalities are employed, things just go off in all sorts of directions. And so you feed the thing that you're aiming toward, or you fuel it with appropriateness and things that are applicable, and so when I'm looking at my Reiki school that I'm slowly building up, I'm going, well, I mean, it's pretty clear generally what we're aiming towards, but there's some things that I'm bringing to the table that may fall out of people's general understandings, because they have the popular understanding. They see the word, they make an association with what that represents, and then that's their motivation for clicking on the thing. But once
Mm-hmm.
they find out what it is, they'll read, oh, okay, this is very clearly laid out and detailed. I can see that there's more than what I initially perceived, and so I feel informed. Great. Now I can make a decision based on very clear understanding, and so maintaining that and having, like you said, your codes of conduct, so that people know it's like this kind of behavior is okay, this is not, and the reason why it's not is because of this, and this. If you guys are coming along for a dating service, that's just going to distract you from what we're actually here, the primary reason for us even attending this situation. So, Mark, would you like to quickly give us a conclusionary sort of like encapsulation, on the street level, a 30-second thing of why, why, what, basically something similar to what I've just said, I guess, just to pack it all in.
If you're a if you are a creative person who dreams of writing the novel, but you simply are like myself, simply not creative enough, nothing will give you better grist for that novel than running a spiritual study group. There will be more things that will happen that you just can't make this stuff up. And you'll meet some really interesting people. You'll meet some fascinating people. You'll meet some people that will really touch you and your heart in a meaningful way. And you'll just have endless stories of endless encounters with human beings on their journey, and your role in it. Your role in it. Remember, it's because you're running the group, you're setting it up, you're the lightning rod. It's all on you. Um, so if you like people, uh, genuinely like them, and can manage the different foibles and not let it overwhelm you, uh, it's a great thing. But if you take yourself too seriously, or you take even what you're teaching too seriously, uh, you're going to find that it'll be a very frustrating experience.
Hmm.
But then it taught you. Then it was the mirror teaching you that maybe there's some things here you need to learn how to adapt with. Um, so I think again, I like groups. I like group activities. That's why I've been running organizations and events for my entire life. Why we have the conference. Why we stuck it out even during COVID when we had to do it virtually. We kept going. Uh, because you make friends and relationships there that you're not going to make anywhere else. And I guarantee you will find at least one person who is going to be at least one who will be very, very helpful and meaningful to you at some point in your life as a result of that. But you will never meet them unless you are involved somehow in being there for others,
Hmm.
in creating an environment and a condition, the causes and conditions for the enlightenment of others.
Hmm.
You can't create the enlightenment for others, but you can create causes and conditions
Hmm.
that allow that to happen more easily and more fruitfully. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about group activity like this.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and yeah, I just reflect back to my time running groups as a music teacher. I had a beautiful studio. I decked it out with all the toys so that the creatives could come in and we could have full immersion. I took all the posters down of all the rock stars and all the musicians. Why? Because it was just distracting. It took the focus away. It was like looking. It was like doing this, and it's another one of these analogies, like the many hands make light work thing. It's like they're mesmerized by the thing that they want to the point where they can't focus on the path to get them to the thing that they think that they want. And so, you go, okay, what's the ideal scenario here? It's not because I want returning membership as such, although that's important for when you're running a thing. But it's like, how do you make it so it's almost like an irresistible prospect in the sense of like, man, you know what? This group is turning out some amazing people and situations. And, I think it's like just also like becoming like making a desirable situation, depending on how public you make it. But it's like, why not be successful in what you do? Why not employ intelligent execution so that you can maximize on the potential? And you go, look, we can do this in a way that is going to have some legs to it. Now, I want to say this has been a wonderful conversation, and I have got. It's funny, we've only got one question. We must have sort of mesmerized the audience so much that there's only one question, and this is actually a bit more, a bit off the topic, but somewhat related. And Tim, who I know is a metaphysical enthusiast, like many others who'll be watching this, he's referring to a specific scenario, but I want to just highlight what he's saying here. He's talking about a group meditation that a particular, I think they're an online group, My Sonju. Oh, yes, and I know them. Of course, I've been on their show. Has planned to break the negative egregore of the chained Statue of Liberty. Well, I mean, I'm going to zoom out on this. I'm not going to talk about it specifically. I'll let Mark comment on how he chooses to. But, when you are involved in a group, I have been involved in group meditations in the past. I don't do a lot of it now. I used to, when I was first wide eyed and spiritually curious, I was joining up for things. And I remember getting involved in this one meditation that seemed like, yeah, let's do this thing together. It was like a sort of a social activism thing with some kind of a thing. And I have to say, the next day, I was sick for days, like insanely, like the next day,
Mhm.
like, and
Yeah.
I'm like going, this was a mass worldwide global event. And, I don't know how many people were involved, but I was involved in it. This is probably a good decade ago. This thing kicked my butt. And I was like, what else was going on here? I don't
Well,
know the other people I was involved with.
yeah. Well, you
I
got
don't really
tapped.
know.
You got
Yeah.
tapped like a battery, and
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So I'm feeding my energy, and somebody's doing something with that or pulling on it. Once they've got the rope, then they can pull on it almost. I'm not sure, but Mark, I'd love to hear your words on this. I'm not saying that this particular situation is like that.
sure. No, I
I'm
understand.
just talking.
I,
I'm
I
talking
think I think we have to look at, whenever we do the group meditations, like the one my wife goes to, and I've accompanied her several times because it's a small group. They've been doing this for decades. They know each other. It's pleasant. I've met them off and on. They're very nice people. Um, I like going, so that's good. I mean, that's part of it. I feel good when I leave, even though I have to kind of scurry back to do my own thing online with my group that night. Um, it's different. Now, I'm not sure what is meant by the chained Statue of Liberty. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So maybe you could type in a clarification, because it is uppercase chained, uppercase statue, uppercase liberty. So I'm not familiar with that phrase or term. We see meditation Maison Jupiter, the House of Jupiter. Is that the group, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they're a channel that I've been on actually a few times. They're a lovely group of lovely ladies, and I'm guessing that this is an effort of something esoteric they've come across. I'll look this up. Chained
Please
Statue of
do.
Liberty.
And then I'll comment on it. Let's take a moment.
Okay. No, it's not in there. Let's try this one. Okay. I cannot see a reference to this, and I've tried the search engine and the AI, so yeah.
Then I'll make some assumptions here, and working with these assumptions. Statue of Liberty, of course, I'm assuming is referring to the Statue of Liberty in New York, outside of Manhattan. Chained, I'm assuming, is referring to some kind of notion that liberty is currently being enchained or restricted. I don't know what that means, because the devil's in the details. When we talk about breaking an egregore, you can't really do that through a meditation. What you can do is build up a counter egregore, a counter thought form, a counter force. But to break an egregore, technically speaking, you need to destroy its physical objects. So if there was and you can do that other ways too. You can do that symbolically or through tokens. So if you had like the Romans would have these kind of little mock battles before the real battle in order to destroy the spiritual forces of their enemies. So you can, if you're trying to stave off something or to convert something, yes, these things are theoretically possible. But having no knowledge of the group or their leadership, I don't know what their capacity is. And generally speaking, those types of things are best not advertised. However, as a general rule, the period of the equinox was a particularly favorite time for a kind of general psychic cleaning. Of course, cleaning is like cleaning your house with kids. It lasts all of 30 seconds, but you still have to do it. So they may be referring to something like that. I've posted several things at Vox Hermes over the years, referring to some articles on the equinox and equinox rituals. I think I have one from a few years ago called Epstein and the Equinox, in which I talked about, you're feeling powerless and you feel, well, here's something you can do. And then I made some references to those equinox rituals. And they're a form of exorcism. You have to understand that. Whenever you're engaging in that type of activity, it's a form of purification. Ritual healing, purification, exorcism, it's all the same. and you have to have the proper framework and mental attitude for it. So when you see a lot of these folks who are going in, like the politicizing a lot of political egregoric activity over the last 4 to 8 years, 10 years, they would often advertise what they were doing. And we automatically knew right then and there they were amateurs. Because what they wanted to do is they wanted to make up for in quantity what they lacked in quality.
Okay. That's thank you for that. That's so
Uh,
Tim, thank you. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to say it's kind of like the Soviets during the Second World War. You know, they would just make up for quantity what they lacked in quality. They would just throw whole human waves of people at the Germans or the Italians or the Axis, whoever they were fighting. And so people attempt that same type of activity on the psychic dimension as well. If we don't have a group of trained, really trained people, maybe even adepts, skillful people, we try to get as many people involved, because that way it's kind of like the old story. I don't know if you remember the old Superman movies from the 80s. There was one with
Mm,
Richard Pryor in it,
mm,
and they ask him, "What are you doing?" Because he's at a computer, and computers still weren't very big then, right? He goes, "I'm robbing a bank." The guy looks at him. "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'm taping every cent after the third decimal point."
yeah.
The guy goes, "Oh, that's only like 100, yeah, but it all adds up." And that's the idea. The guy saying, "Give me your $2 coffee money." It all adds up. So when they do these things, they're trying to get as many people involved. And I think that's really what
Mm,
you experienced, um,
mm.
Phil, that type of thing. And you don't really know who's in charge.
Well, I mean, I kind of loosely know the people involved here, but one thing I will say is that you make a good point, because you've basically got all of these people blowing into the bag or into the balloon to inflate it, and you're getting all of this stuff going in. Like we talk in the Barden system, especially in regards to healing, this idea of psychic contaminants, and so the whole of the thing is made up by all of its individual parts to some extent. And whatever, if you've got people joining in who have just to throw in emotional instabilities, or they have sort of personal problems and things like that, you're creating a very focused and intentional link with this thing that's forming, and there's a two-way exchange going on that you can benefit from and also be detrimented by. And so that's why, throughout this conversation, we've talked about the importance of the quality of the people that we engage with, and being precise about that, because at a psychic level, it's a whole different ball game. The rule sets different. And sometimes you go into these things with the best of intentions and with a bit of blind faith that everything looks rosy on the exterior. But once you have, like I had, like I can only attribute it to that thing. I was fine the day before we did the meditation. It was fine. It was midnight. I got it the next day. I had to get taken to the local. My sister took me to the local A&E because I had in crazy like pneumonia type flu-like symptoms. Like I have not had that in years, just like that, just out of the blue. I had no notion of it, wasn't even that kind of season or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I guess what happens is that, like, you, all mushrooms are edible at least once, and you'll
I like
find
that.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember I bit into an apple once, and it was a bit nasty in the middle. I didn't eat apples again for a while. And so, I think in a situation that's like Tim's talking about here, I think it's being made with the best of intentions. But I can only speak from my experience. That's my preferred sort of platform to sort of enunciate from, and that is like ask questions. Think about important questions, like some of the things we've talked about today, and forward those on. So
Well, let me just comment on that. I think if you want to be of service, just be of service every day. There's a certain practice we have uh, within the institute that is set variations of it, because people can decide how they want to undertake it. But
hmm,
the generation of goodwill, and it's in the Liturgy of Hermes, and it's also in the monograph Wisdom's Bliss. And how do we generate goodwill towards others? If you're really only doing that when you get this notion of joining some political activist, which is what that is. I mean, uh, Jupiter rules politics. Okay, so if you're dealing with that kind of activism, uh, you're really not. This isn't important to you because it's not part of your daily thing, and then it's important to a particular function or outcome rather than generation of goodwill. Whereas if you learn to generate goodwill, an intelligent compassion, we call it, intelligent awakening, intelligent effort. If you learn to develop equanimity, which is incredibly important, equanimity
Mm.
is the foundation of all enlightenment, all awakening, um, and all of our mental success too, because it's you know, we move from that point of equanimity. Um, you will then find that things work easier for you and better for you in all areas, and you're naturally radiating this goodwill, and that's having its natural effect. Now, if
Mm.
you really focus on this and become dedicated and say, I want to be, I want to serve the invisible, I want to serve the adepti, I want to be in the ranks of the heroes. Okay, well,
Mm.
that's another story altogether. Then you'll get that. Trust me, you'll get that opportunity. Um,
Mm.
but you have to be ready to step up for what you ask for too.
Yeah, yeah. I think you ask for the opportunity. Sometimes you might be punching above your weight without realizing it, and there's going to be a consequence to that. But hey, we figure things out as we go along. What do they say that experience is the gold of alchemy,
Yep.
and we profit from assessing what has been that we can confidently sort of ascertain, and I think distilling that down and going and sharing it out there and going, it's the post the social media post starts off with something like, it seemed like a good idea and
Yeah.
everything was there, but for
Well,
some reason.
my computer is going to die in about 2 minutes or less. But that's the thing. The famous last words in front of every judge, parent, emergency room doctor was, "It seemed like a good idea at the time."
Perfect. Well, let's get cracking into this then, because if your computer's going to die, then we want to make sure that people know that the IHS 2025 annual conference is going to be on February 13.
No, no, no.
Oh, no, sorry,
June,
that's no, sorry. Hang on,
June
June. Here we go
5th.
down the bottom here.
Yeah. And they can participate in it virtually or live. And virtually also means we take the recording and we make it available to you, so you don't have to be there and suffer through live streaming. I mean, it's great. But live streaming is unedited, so there's a lot of dead time between lunch and stuff. So just sign up. We also have our online course, uh, Pluto and Aquarius 2025 and beyond, which is a great set of predictions to help you understand what is happening now in the world and how to make sense of the next 20 to 30 years. And it's really good. We also have our free online course, Unfolding the Rose, Illumination in Western Esotericism, which is 6 hours of great instruction.
Oh,
So
wow.
please sign up for it. And there, I've got the whole blurb in. And when my computer just goes blank now, we'll know why. But please take advantage of that opportunity. We've got some great courses,
Mm.
and we've got a lot of material there that you're not going to find anywhere else.
All these links are in the YouTube description below, everybody, just so you know. And we have mentioned in this conversation the topic of one of Mark's books, which is the Light on the Path, a study guide for Kabbalah and alchemy. And also, we mentioned Pathology of the Sublime. And so these are searchable sorts of writings from Mark and the Institute. And so, there's plenty of resources, everyone. Um, and obviously, Mark, you've got a lot of books here. And so, just to say, everyone, look, fill your boots. Mark's got a heck of a corpus to explore. And we're very grateful for all the work that Mark does. And just to make sure we get a good send off before everything ends, Mark, have you got any concluding comments on anything, or would like to add anything? And thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very grateful.
Just jump in and do it. Just jump in, do it. You're going to learn a lot about yourself, which is the whole purpose of this path. And you're going to learn a lot about how you help others and how to help others in a meaningful way. There's going to be trouble. There's going to be problems. Don't worry about it. It's about growth. It's about skill set and development. And that's it. That's the best you can do.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us in the broadcast today, everyone in the chat. We're grateful for all your participation, comments, questions, and just general chinwag and that. And this was a very last minute thing we put together, but I think there's a lot of value in this. And this recording will be made available for the Phil Rice Substack viewers and the Institute for Hermetic Studies Patreons, and then it will be made available for public viewing in the coming weeks. And so please look out for that. We appreciate your support, and so we're happy to create these materials, and so that you can help to ensure that we can create these learning environments for those who have an invested interest and those who also aren't able to but can at some point. So thank you very much. Have a beautiful week, everyone, and I'll see you again very soon on the Phil Rice channel. And I'll ask the guest, Mr. Mark Stavish, if you could just stick around for 1 second after I end the broadcast. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.